My name is David Vincent, and this is the Warrior Center story. The start of the Warrior Center really began January 21st, 1997. I was laying on the cold jail cell floor, weeping and crying before the Lord because my life was over. I'd grown up in the inner city. My mom had taught me to steal. My stepfather that raised me was a killer. Had been very abused. I grew up a thief. My first arrest was at 6 years old. First time I broke in a house, I was 9 years old. I broke in the house for my mom. First time I broke into a building, I was 14. By the time I'm 19, I'm traveling around. Of course, I'm drinking from the time I was young. I was doing every kind of drug. And the life I live brought me to that spot. And that spot I was at, I was 28 years old. I was in jail, headed to prison on my 13th through 18th burglary charges. I would have done about 15 years in prison. My wife was divorcing me. I had 3 beautiful girls that I did not deserve. And so my life was over. And I got down on the bottom of that cold jail cell floor and I just cried out on the Lord. So I knew He was real. I just had never really surrendered my life to Him. And I begged God for mercy. And I told God, if you will get me out of this and let me get out of jail and prison before my children grow up, I will finally give you my life. And God spoke to me, and it was in a small, still voice. And what I heard was, David, I'm going to have mercy on you, and I'm going to deliver you out of all these charges. And so I just knew that God had spoke to me. And immediately after that, miracles started happening. And at that time, I had 5 burglary charges in 5 different counties in 2 states, and I already had 13 felony convictions, so it was over for me. And immediately after that, God started doing miracles in my life, and charges were dropped, and things started happening, and I knew that God had spoke to me, and I knew that I was getting out of there. At that time, though, I was also scared because I knew many times I'd try to turn my life around before and it never stuck. I would last a month and I'd be back doing the same things that I was doing before. And I was really scared. And while I was in jail, God gave me a verse out of the Bible in Jeremiah 29:11-14. But at the end of that passage, it says that you will find God when you seek Him with all your heart. So I knew that God was speaking to me, that He was telling me that if I would, while I was there, learn to seek Him and do it with all my heart, that He would deliver me from everything that holds me captive. So I took that promise and I began doing that. And I began reading the Bible for the first time in my life. I read the entire Bible from cover to cover. Then I read the New Testament 6 times. I started memorizing Scripture. I memorized 30, 50, 75, 100, 120. Every time somebody came in and bringing in speaking about the Bible or doing a Bible study, if it was a nun, if it was a Pentecostal, if it was a Baptist, they were black, white, Hispanic, whoever came in, I was going to get a word. And I began pressing into God, and God began moving in my heart, and I felt myself being healed. I felt I was changing from the inside, and God just started doing wonderful miracles in me. I was there seeking God with all my heart, and God just delivered me. I went from one state to another state. I went from one county to another county, and just going from place to place to place. And every place I went, God moved in my life. Every place I went, God delivered me, till finally it came, and it came to the day where He would keep all His promises to me. The door opened, and I walked out, and to never ever walk back again. I got out of jail and started putting my life back together, and I was able to get my 3 daughters back in my life, and I was able to get a job. I was a waiter. Then I started a lawn care company, cutting grass, and just started getting my roots down, got in church, met some great people. Met a guy that ran a mission in West Memphis, and started going over there and volunteering. And then I had some friends that had problems and addictions, and started helping them and getting them involved in church. And then I rented a house, and I had 2 friends named Paul Brown and Dustin Pruitt, and they moved in with me and started getting their life together, and we started getting involved in church. And it was out of our friendship that we decided to start Warrior Ministries. And the whole premise behind it was we were going to do a monthly Bible study and open it up to people who were battling addiction or struggles, and to invite them to a Bible study, because a lot of people wouldn't, go to church, and invite them to a dinner and a meal and a Bible study. And out of that, we would do outreach ministry. So we started that, and it began to really grow. We had like 9 people the first time, and the next time 23, and the next time 36. And so we were having this Bible study in my home, and all these people were coming. And out of that, everybody had a heart to help, and we began doing outreach work and feeding the homeless and those types of things. We were doing some street ministry in Memphis. I met this couple named Danny and Linda Watts, just a precious couple, and we began reaching out to them and trying to get them to help. And we started a relationship. Sometimes I would invite them to church, they wouldn't come. But we became friends, and I'd go by and check on them. Invited them to church many times before, but they never came. But on this night, they said yes, and it kind of surprised me. And I said, "So you'll go?" And they said, "Yeah." We came and picked them up and took them to church that night. And at the end of the service, a miracle happened. The pastor was given an altar call, and this couple, and they had walked in dirty, smelly. They were really drunk, and they had walked in and were participating in this church service. But at the end of that service, they both went down the altar, and they were just weeping and crying at the altar. And the pastor prayed over them and asked God to have mercy and to deliver them. And when they got up, something was different. It was like they were not drunk. Their spirits were different. The burdens were lifted. You could see that hope back in their eyes. And it was like they got up off that altar, and they were different than the people that walked in. And it was just awesome to see. And we left, and we got in the truck, and we were going back, and the man asked me, "So David, where are you taking us now?" And of course, first thought in my mind was, well, I'm taking you back to that Exxon, that abandoned Exxon, back home to sleep on that mattress that you were sleeping on before. But I thought that, but I didn't really say it. And I just really paused for a minute and didn't answer and kind of thought about it. And then I said, "Tell you what, you can go home with me and my girls tonight, and we'll figure it out." So we took them to our house. And I piled up in the room with my girls, for safety reasons, as these were strangers, and let them have my room and bed, and we said we'll work it out. They ended up staying with us between 3 and 4 weeks. We were able to get them in church. They stopped drinking. We could help get the lady a job and just help get them moving forward in a new life. And it was just it was wonderful for me just to be able to, be a part of that. Out of that, God always began sending people. It's like people would come, people would know, well, that guy named David Vincent, helps people, and people would knock on my door, people would introduce me to people. But from that moment on, there was always somebody living at my house and helping somebody get off drugs, or getting somebody just in church and just got out of jail. So it just began, growing and growing. Of course, I had 2 roommates, my friends Paul and Dustin, and they lived there, and God was doing a great work in their life. So we always had people. But the scene got a little wild. I'm young. I'm 31 years old at that time, and I got 3 little girls, joint custody about half the time, so it was a little wild. So there's always people there. It was a good thing, but they would be up, having Bible studies 1 o'clock in the morning, and I got to go at 6. So I remember I decided in my mind that, I can't have people live with me anymore. It's a little bit too hectic. So from there, I said I was going to move out. So I got a house in the same city, South Haven, Mississippi, and we went over there, and I got a house, and it was a nice 4-bedroom house, and a room for me and all 3 children. And I basically told my friends, "Hey, y'all can keep the Bible studies over there and keep it going, but I need some peace and quiet. I need to have a place for my children." And we moved over there. Me not being there and being, kind of the leader, things started dwindling, and the Bible study dwindled down. But for me, in my mind, it was like, the most important thing was, us having some peace. So I remember going over, and I told myself at that time, I'll never let somebody live with me again. It's just, it's too much, And one night, there was a knock at the door, and it was about midnight. And at the door was a kid named Sean. He was about 17 years old, and he lived in the neighborhood. And when I opened the door, he was crying. He said, "I need somebody to talk to." I said, "Well, sure, come on in and talk." And he came in, and he said that he'd been on crystal meth, and he wanted to die. And he went on to say, he said, "I tried to kill myself tonight." And I said, what happened? He said, I got a gun in the house that I was staying, and I put a bullet in the chamber, and I put it in my mouth, and I pulled the trigger. And I said, what happened? He said, I don't know what happened. And he said, but I looked at the gun, and I took the bullet out, and he said, the bullet has a mark on the back where the pin hit it, so I don't know what happened. And he handed me the bullet, and I looked at it, and it had a mark on the back. And he started crying. He says, I want to die, but God won't let me die. What do I do? And so we got on the floor, and I prayed with him. And I began just praying with him and asking God to have mercy on him and touch his life. And I led him to Christ, and he prayed the prayer of salvation and asked the Lord to come in his life and take control. And he was weeping and crying, and I was crying. It was an awesome moment. And he got up, and then he looked at me and he said, okay, David, where do I go from here? And I thought, oh, no, not again. I didn't want anybody to live in my house anymore. Please, no, Lord. And he looked at me and puppy dog eyes, and I said, well, you can stay here a few nights until we, find you a place to go, which we never did at that time. And so I let Sean stay there, and I said, well, you can live on the couch, and we'll help you. And of course, we got him in church and started getting him on the right track. And then I get a call from a lady, and her 19-year-old son was on drugs, and he had nowhere else to go, and he got kicked out of another rehab, and he needed some help. And so I said, well, bring him over. And I met him, and I let him move in. And then next thing you know, I got 4 people live with me, and 5, and then 7, and then 9. And it's like, here we go again. God's not letting me away from this, and he's always sending people. And it began growing. And it was then that we really started our program, the Warrior Center program. And I started setting up a program that God had taken me through when I'd been in jail that year. And so we set up a program of leading men to God by teaching them to seek him. And I felt like God showed me that I can't change anybody's life. I can't do what it takes to change a person, but he could. And so we started a program of Bible studies, recovery meetings, and teaching men the Word of God and encouraging them, discipling men. And God started a powerful work, and we began growing, and God was doing great things. Then we had an issue where the city of South Haven that we were in, it was just a suburb outside of Memphis, came and said, Mr. Vincent, you have too many people living in your house, and you can't do this here. I understood it, but at the same time, all these people were coming from that neighborhood. So they wrote me a ticket, and I had to go to court. And I remember, just like yesterday, going to court and going before the judge. And he said, who are all these people you have in your house? I said, just people from the community, young guys, need help. And I'm just, getting them in church and giving them some help, guys battling addiction. He says, well, you need to get all of these people out of that house. And I said, okay, yes, sir. Thought it was funny, though, since all of these people were from right there in the community. From that point, of course, I was in a place where I had no money. I had nowhere to take all these people. It's like, well, what do I do? And I remember being really, really sad. And it was like, God, we have all these people here, and what am I going to do? And God, I made you a promise that as long as I had one person seeking God, I would never quit this. But what do? I have nowhere to go. And it was like God spoke to my heart, and he gave me a promise. And God told me, don't quit, David. I'm going to do something really special with this ministry. One day, you will have programs all over the country and the world. Of course, that's a pretty big promise there. Some people would think I was crazy, but I knew God had spoke to me because it was the same voice that spoke to me on the bottom of that jail cell floor. So, of course, I was like, God is just telling me not to quit. He's really going to do something special. So we just hung on and said, God, you got to provide something. And within in a couple weeks, God opened up a door for another home. So from there, I began looking for another house. I started calling some people in the community, even called one of the county supervisors. And they spoke with me and said, well, David, the ministry you're doing is a good ministry, and it's a needed thing, but a lot of people don't want that type of thing around. So he said, what you need to do is, go out in the country and get you a house on some acreage and just get away, and nobody will mess with you, and you'll be able to do your ministry. And so I thought, coming from a, key county politician, that was the go-ahead. And so began looking for some houses and found a house in the country. A couple was renting a house because they had moved away. So went to them and rented this house. It's a nice house, 2-story, 2,700 square foot. It was on 5 acres. So We then moved out of that house, moved into the new house, and began our ministry there. Um, when we got out there, a lot of the neighbors didn't like what we were doing, so they began asking questions. They went to the sheriff's department and basically filed a complaint. They had a neighborhood meeting, and everybody was riled up. They just didn't want this type of ministry around. So the county officials came out and met me at the house, and they basically said, look, sir, you can't do this here. You're going to have to leave today. We can't leave today. We have nowhere to go. He said, well, you're going to have to come to court. So they then called us into court, and that began what was a 6-month court battle with the people that lived in that community, and have a hearing before all of the county supervisors, one of which had told me it was all right to be out there in that area. So we had this meeting. Of course, there was many people from the neighborhood, and they got up and said a lot of negative things about me and a lot of negative things about the people that we help and that sort of thing. But we also had a lot of people who came that knew us from church, people that we'd helped. And one by one at the end of the meeting, they just started going up and sharing, I had nowhere to go, and this ministry took me in, and this is what's going on in my life now. And people just began sharing from their heart, and it was really, really good. And even I looked over one time and I saw a bailiff, and he was crying. Somebody was sharing their testimony of what God had done in their life. And it was pretty amazing. At the very end of the meeting, of course, we were just asking for grace, saying this ministry was really needed in our community. They had their vote, and 1 voted for us and 4 voted against us. And they said that you can't do this here, and that you're gonna, we give you 30 days to move out. So I walked out. Of course, I was sad. Like, what are we gonna do? How are we gonna keep helping the people that we're helping? And what happened was I walked out into the hall. Of course, I was just shell-shocked. And when I walked out the hall, a county administrator who worked for the county came up to me, and he said, "Can I speak with you a minute?" And I stepped over to the side. He said, "I just want to tell you that was amazing." He said, "I've been in public life all my life." He said, "I'm a former mayor. I ran for U.S. Congress. I'm a former district attorney." And he said, "I've never seen God move in a courtroom like that." He said, you could feel God in there. He said, "I've seen a couple grown men cry." He said, "And I know they voted against you, but when we walked into the back room, 2 of those men came to me with tears in their eyes and said, 'We need to help that man. He's doing a good thing.'" He said, "So can you come into my office and see what I can do to help you?" So I said, "Sure, I'll be there tomorrow." So a couple days later, we went in, and I met with him. Of course, he was a great guy, and he said, "I'm going to do everything I can to talk to everybody and use our contacts to try to find you a place, in this area." Of course, he worked tirelessly. We looked at places, and really it's hard to find a home that meets the standards that you could put that many people in, and we didn't find anything for a while, and it got down to there was 4 days left on the 30-day countdown. Didn't have any money, didn't have anywhere to go, and then I get a phone call. And I got a call, and he called me. He said, "You're not going to believe this." He said, "I was in the dentist's office today, and I was speaking to a dentist, and his name is Dr. Robert Seymour from Hernando, and he has some property. And on this property, it's a former campground, and has an office, and it has a trailer. And he said they're going to be building a new office building there, but you can use it for a few months while you continue to look for a place." I said, "We'll take anything, but what are all the government people going to say?" He said, "Well, I can handle that." He said, "Just come meet with me. We're going to go talk to him." So one by one, he took me to every one of the aldermen and the mayor's office, and we basically went in their office. He said, "This is David Vincent. He's doing that warrior ministry stuff, and his name was in the papers and everything, and he's doing a great thing, and the county supervisors want me to help him, and we want him to use this property for a few months." And I said, "Well, he's doing a great thing, and he can do it over there, but as long as we don't get any complaints." So it was kind of like a undercover in a cave thing. All the city officials said it was okay, but it didn't need to be known. So we moved over to this campground. We began using the building. We had 18 to 20 men there, and the trailers. Of course, I was living there, and we continued to do ministry there, and we continued to grow. We were there about 4 months, continuing to help men, continue to look for a place, but it was like a needle in a haystack, and we hadn't found a building, nothing like that. And then we got a notice because the construction was going to begin there on Dr. Seymour's property. So they let us know that, you have about a month, construction's gonna begin. So we continued looking, and then we got down to we had about 2 weeks. We had 2 weeks left, nowhere to go, where we're gonna go. And a dear friend named Jack came by, and he says, I know a lady, she has a 170-acre retreat center south of Olive Branch, and she has a heart for men and women battling addiction because her husband was a doctor and he had committed suicide. And I'm gonna go talk to her about possibly she might let you stay there. So I said, talk to anybody you want. We're still looking, we need a place. So we got down there, we had about 10 days, and then I get a call, and he said, I talked to her and she wants to meet you. So we went out there and we met with her, and she basically opened up her doors. So we moved out to this new property. It was called Brigadoon Farms, beautiful place, 170 acres. Beautiful, beautiful place. And we began doing our ministry out there, and things were going really, really well. We had a good relationship with the lady. We'd been out there about 4 months, and then a bad event happened. I had a gentleman in the program, and he was having some issues, and he said he wanted to leave, and he came to me, he said, David, I don't want to be here anymore. Can you just give me a ride to the hospital? I said, sure, just grab your bags and stuff and get in the truck, and I will run you up there. So we got in the truck, and I was taking him off the premises to the hospital, and we were headed up into Memphis and on Interstate I-240, and I was running about 70 miles an hour. He started acting weird, messing around in the bag in the side of the truck. He was also crying and saying he didn't want to live anymore, and I was trying to calm him down. And then he said, David, are we almost to the hospital? And I raised my hand up, and I said, yes, sir, it's right up here on the right. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw him reach into the side of the door, and he started lunging at me, and he had a knife in his hand. At that time, I was in the fight of my life, and he was wildly swinging that knife all over the truck, and I was just kept blocking and pushing him away. I was trying to drive with my left hand. He took the knife, and he was wildly swinging the knife at my hand, trying to knock my hand off the steering wheel. He grabbed the steering wheel and slammed us into a van. We slammed into a wall and came still. Of course, I'm about 36 years old at that time. I'm younger and stronger and faster than him, but this guy's about 48 years old, and he was just throwing me around like a rag doll. I would get a hold of him, he would throw me off. I'd grab a hold of his hand and knife, he would throw me off. There was a van smashed up behind us in the back, and they were calling 911 to get the police there. One time I got a hold of the knife and on the top, and he jerked it really hard, and it caught my thumb and went 3/4 of the way around my thumb. He reared back with the knife and got me really good in the left shoulder, and it went about 1.5 inches deep. When it went in, my whole left hand went numb, and my arm just fell down. He then jumped up on top of me and reared the knife back, and he was coming down towards my face, neck area, and I managed to lift up this arm and block it, and he punctured my arm. And it was kind of at that time where I knew, I'm about to die. My little girls are about to not have their daddy. And he reared the knife back, brought it back behind his head, and was fixing to stab me as I did not have use of this arm. And when he reached back to stab me from being over on top of me in the seat, finally it just hit me, and I said, Jesus, help me. And right when I said, Jesus, help me, it was like I felt this strength just shoot through my body. I just felt it from the top of my head to the soles of my feet. I just felt strength come into my body. And I only had one arm, and I just grabbed him, and I put my hand up under his legs and tail area, and we were in a King Cab truck, and I spun him over and flipped him over the seat with such force that both the seats just snapped back and broke. I slammed him on his back and put my elbow in his stomach, chest area, and managed to hold him down. I got both hands around the knife. He was fighting. We were fighting. I kept slamming his hand against the back window. Couldn't get him to drop the knife, but I had him pinned down. He fought for what seemed like an eternity. Finally, he started losing his strength, and he opened his eyes, and when he looked at me, I could just see the hatred. And I don't know, it's just like the Spirit came over me because I love the guy. I'd ministered to him, I'd reached out to him, I'd stayed up late with him, talking with him and praying for him. But the Spirit just came over me, and I said, Danny, I love you anyway. And when I did that, he started shaking and he just started weeping. And he dropped the knife and I dropped it in the floor and he just put his hands in his face and he was weeping. I grabbed the knife and threw it out in the street to get rid of that thing and then held him down because I was worried about him getting out of the truck, jumping in front of a car. And as I held him down, he was just there, just crying uncontrollably. Finally, the police made it there, and of course, they jumped in and arrested him and began taking care of me. I was taken to the Med Trauma Center in Memphis and checked out. I was worried about my truck. I was hoping it wasn't ruined, and it was. You know, we went to the impound yard and looked at it, and it was totally demolished, front smash, side smash, all the way down, and they totaled it out. So I was getting my belongings out of the truck, and I remembered that I had a necklace on, which was actually a dog tag. And a dog tag has 2 tags on it. One of them, I wrote on there, David Vincent. And I wrote January 21st, 1997, because that was the day that I found Christ on the jail cell floor and my life was changed forever. And then on the smaller tag, I had a scripture put on there, and it said Psalms 91:7, though 1,000 fall at your side and 10,000 at your right hand, it shall not come near you. And I did that because I was grabbing a hold of one of God's promises, and it was two-sided really. And for one, I said, you know, number one, the enemy will never take me out spiritually. But as long as I live, I will serve the Lord. I'm never going to backslide. I'm never going to fall away. And I will never be taken out spiritually. That God is going to cover me and protect me, that I will not fall again. And then also naturally, and I said, you know what? You know, I feel like I know I have a call on my life, and God's got great plans, and there's nothing the enemy can do to take my life physically or cut my life short, because God's going to cover me. So I had that faith. God's going to protect me physically, and He will also always protect me spiritually. And so that was the promise, and I wore this dog tag, and of course, you know, I'd wear it to the Warrior Center every day. I would have it on, and I was standing on that promise, and I had it on that night in that truck. He said when I got home from the Med Trauma Center, I couldn't find it. I wondered what had happened to it. So I went back to that truck to get my belongings, and I opened the back seat, and I went to look back there to see, you know, is anything in there? And I looked down, and laying right on the seat, right where really, I think, right where God spared my life, was one of the dog tags, and it was face up, and I looked down and I saw the scripture, Psalms 91:7, though 1,000 fall at my side and 10,000 in my right hand, it shall not come near me. And I looked down and I saw it shall not come near me. And of course, I knew what God was speaking to me there. It was Him that protected my life that night in that truck. And He didn't just spare my life, but I know He also protected the Warrior Center that night. But from there, that created a big problem because, you know, we were leasing property out on this land, and the lady that was renting us the property became very upset, understandably so. You know, one of the men that were in this ministry, you know, tried to kill the director, and so that was a really big deal. And she, after that happened, she came to me and said that, you know, y'all have a couple of weeks to get out of here, but you can't stay here anymore. So then we were at that same place again, looking for a place, having to leave and having no money to do it, and basically having to just trust God to make a way. So after losing our place at Brigadoon Farms because of the stabbing, we later ended up at a commercial building in Horn Lake. And the owners there felt like it would be okay for us to rent the facility, and we moved in there because we had nowhere else to go. So we were doing our ministry there, and then the city of Horn Lake came to us and said, you cannot do this here. We did find a friend within city government who told us that really what was happening was illegal, that all the cities that we were working with weren't allowing us in some area of the city. And basically he said, you know, y'all need to get an attorney and be able to defend yourself because they can't tell you you can't go in every single area of the city. So the owners of the property did retain an attorney, and the attorney began defending us. But then there were some negative newspaper stories in the newspaper, and we were on the front page about 7 times in 2 weeks. And every time the story ended, it would say, you know, it's ran by David Vincent, a convicted felon. And so we really got some bad press. And then on top of that, my ex-wife and her father began writing letters to the editor. The city basically said, you know what, you have to leave there now. And so I went and talked to them. I said, what's the main issue here? They said, well, you're not zoned for people to stay overnight and sleep there. And I said, well, just to survive, we'll make a change. And so what we did was I started taking 5 people to my house every night, which was under the zoning regulations of where I live. And then we had another person who took 8 or 9 people every night to a house in the country. So we were doing our program during the day, and we were doing Bible studies, and we were teaching, and we were having recovery meetings. But at night, per the regulations, we would not sleep there, and we were taking the men to different houses. And we did this for a couple weeks, but basically the city just wanted us out. And they said, no, they came to me and they said, you're going to have to leave. And I said, well, this isn't fair. I mean, all we're doing is Bible study. I mean, this is no different from the church. And I said, then I want to get zoning for a church, because that's what we are. We are the church. And they wouldn't even allow me to apply for it. And they said, no, you're just going to have to leave. They then went to the judge of the Horn Lake, and he signed an order, and that order gave us 72 hours to be off that property. I thought it was dirty. I thought it was wrong. I thought, we're here in the United States, and we can't do Bible studies in a house during the daytime. But it really was, it came to the point is that they didn't want me and being a convicted felon there. They didn't want these kind of guys that we were working with in their community. So they did the backroom deal, and they ordered us off. So the order actually was left on the door, and it said, if you are not out in 72 hours, a chain will be put on this property. So we were at a place like, what do we do now? I have no money. The city of Horn Lake is kicking us out. A lot of drama going on. And so all we did was we started praying. God, you got to open up a door. You got to make a way. Everywhere we go, they're kicking us out, and it's not working. And so we began all praying, God, make a way. And of course, I just believed that God would. And the owners of the property came to me, and they said, David, maybe you just need to close the ministry. Maybe you just, you need to close the ministry and regroup. Maybe in a couple of years you can open it up. And I said, I can't do that. And she said, why? I said, because I promised God, as long as I had one man that was seeking God, that I would never turn my back on him. And I'm not putting these guys out. And I got a phone call from a lady in West Memphis. And she called and she said, David, I know about you and I know about your ministry. And she said, maybe I can help you. She says, I started a ministry in West Memphis, and it was going to be a women's home, and I never got it off the ground. She said, and now I'm losing my building. She said, I owe $1,500 in utilities. I owe $2,000 in back payments. I'm about to lose my building in foreclosure. If you could come up with the money and you could help me save my building, maybe we can help each other. Of course, I said, well, I don't have $3,500. I might have $100, but let's see. And of course, I prayed. I said, God, if this is your will, then I pray that you would open up a door. So I put it out there, and I let some people know, hey, if we can come up with $3,500, we can move into this former women's shelter, and we can start our ministry from there and not have to close. A bunch of donations started coming in. This person said, I'll give $300. This person gave $500. This person gave $200. And then we were sitting with $2,100, and we had $1,400 left to go. We got down when we had 1 day left. It's like, okay, Lord, we need $1,400. And then we had a lady named Amy Butler who worked at our ministry at that time and kind of ran the administration in the office. She said, David, we have some mail today, and it looks like it's a check. So I went and I opened it up, and I opened up the check, and I looked, and it was a donation for $1,400 even. And I thought, wow. And this guy, I hadn't talked to him. He didn't know anything about what was going on. I called him later. His name was Mr. David Nunley. I said, David, why did you send $1,400? He said, God put it on my heart to give a donation, and I asked how much, and I just felt strongly it was going to be $1,400. So we had perfect amount of what we needed. So we took that $3,500, we saved that building out of foreclosure, caught the utilities up, and on the last day that we had before they were going to put chains on the door, we started moving all our stuff, and we moved over to the ministry in West Memphis. We got to a place where we could just be still, and we really could focus on ministry and grow our ministry. We were able to go from 15 to 32 beds, so we were able to help more men. We were able to take on some more staff. We then started doing some painting and remodeling out of our ministry as a fundraiser. and things just started going well. After being there a couple years, I remember seeking the Lord about how do we raise up men out of this program to be in the ministry, and that was just really hard. God showed me a scripture in the Old Testament that spoke about David being in the cave of Adullam, and how over 400 men came to him. And these 400 men, they were outcast and losers and in debtors, and which means they had warrants for their arrest, and they were the outcasts of society. And they were in this cave for a few years, and God did a mighty work in this cave, and these men in this cave but later became David's special forces, his mighty men, and God did great mighty exploits in them later on. And so it was really out of that I started studying that scripture in the Bible, and found out, that David had basically put military order in that cave, and that there were captains of 10 and captains of 50. And so that's what we did. We said, we're going to set military structure in our program. We set up ranking systems, and guys would begin moving up in rank as they went through our program, and they would go up in rank for growing spiritually. They would go in for rank for going on outreaches and feeding the homeless themselves and participating in jail ministry. So as we began putting this military structure in, the program just started exploding and really growing. We started seeing the fruits, more men graduating, more lives changed, more men getting out and going into the ministry and serving God. And then God opened up a door for missions to us. And I always had a dream. I thought if I could get these guys on the mission field, then God could do just mighty things in their life while they're in our program. And people told me, well, you got to wait till they get their life together first. And I said, well, God didn't wait for me to get my life together before I started serving, and that's really what changed my life. I feel like if I wouldn't have been serving and working with the homeless and doing jail ministry, that I probably would have fallen and went back. It was giving me a purpose is the reason why I made it. And so I began praying. God opened up a door so we can get involved in missions, and we met a group that were doing many trips to Mexico. And they opened up a door for us, and we began sending 3 men, 6 men, 12 men a trip. And every 3 months we would send groups of men to go down there and build Bible colleges and churches and lay block and just doing amazing work. And then God blessed us with the opportunity for a grant, and the door was opened up, and we got some grant money. And this allowed me to quit my job and go full time and hire some additional staff. And as God kept opening up doors and more resources were coming, our program just continued to get stronger and stronger. So after being there about 5 years, God caused an event to kind of push us out of the nest, so to speak. The lady that owned the property came to me and basically gave us a notice and said that we only had a few weeks to leave, and that she wanted her property back. She wanted to use it for some other purposes. Of course, that put us in a predicament because we had nowhere to go. We didn't have money saved, and we were under the gun. So at that time, I then began looking around Memphis for a building, praying that God would open up a door, because we have very little time at our current building. So I went and took a look at a building in Memphis, and it was a great building. It was a former nursing home. It was a former treatment center, 12,000 square feet. It had a kitchen and basketball court and volleyball court and seating areas, and it was just a great facility. And so I went to the property, and I just felt, this is ours. And as I walked around it and took a look at the property, I just felt in my heart that God was telling me that this property was going to be ours. So I prayed. I said, Lord, pray if it be your will that you give us this property and that you make a way for us. But I just knew leaving that day that God was going to make a way for us. So I found out who the owners were, and I talked to them, and they said, well, this property's worth about $400,000, and it is in foreclosure. And I said, well, I'd like to make an offer on it. And they said, okay, well, what would your offer be? I said, how about $175,000 with zero down? And they said, we think we can do that. And so there started the process for us getting that building. So we began making plans to move in the building. Then we hit a bump in the road. And we had an issue where there was someone else that was looking at the property, and this was a cash offer, and it wasn't as much as ours. And we were kind of led along to believe that it definitely was ours. And I called him, and he said, I'm sorry, we can't sell you the building anymore. Somebody's made another offer, and it's cash, and I'm going to need to take that. Of course, I thought, what do I do now? I mean, I thought God said that this would be our building, and we have nowhere to go. So, I kind of took a step back, and I was praying. I was like, God, what do I do? And then what was really in my heart was like, Just because you face a hindrance or something gets in your way doesn't mean it's still not God. Sometimes you got to fight for stuff. So I started doing some investigation, and I got in touch with the people who were the former owners of the treatment center. And it was at a place called New Directions, and I called them and I said, look, we wanted your building. We were told we could have your building, and now they pulled that offer back on the table. And I was just doing some digging to find out what was the status of that. And the news I found out is that the bank actually had not even filed foreclosure yet, even though they'd been out of there a year. So finding that out, I said, well, then that means if they haven't filed foreclosure, then you really have a say-so right now, don't you? And they said, well, yes, we do. I said, well, look, we do what you do. You know, you guys were in the treatment field, so are we. We're a Christian-based organization, and we would like to know if we could get your support and get behind us so we could get this building and be able to help people. And the former executive director said, well, that's what we want. That's where our heart is. We want that place to be used for another treatment center, recovery center, something that helps people. So that's our standing, and we will tell the bank that. So we get settled in at 642 Sims, and things are really going well. We went from 32 beds to 65 beds. Our program just continued to get stronger. We also got licensed by the state of Tennessee. We brought on staff, a licensed drug and alcohol counselor, something very unique to faith-based ministries. We also increased our staff, and things were really going well. Our program has gotten stronger and stronger. We're graduating more and more people. We have more and more guys getting out and doing good, going into the ministry. Our mission, we've taken 31 mission trips now from Mexico, Honduras, Haiti, and God's just done a lot of wonderful things